Hello, people. Um, I'm very grateful for the responses I've had from Panos, Jameson, and Pierre. It seems like I've actually found a good, creative, progressive bunch of thinkers. Um, I will try to do another video to expand on some of these ideas. Um, I'm obviously very keen to join all the discussions internally and meetings, so I'll be looking forward. But I also have a few friends who are interested, and maybe I'll manage to attract some more attention from them and get them to join in as well. So yeah, I'll just go through some of the comments and try to expand. I mean, in essence, the first video was, I thought, rather challenging in that it didn't quite make it clear how certain things are horribly utopistic or wonderfully utopistic, and others are trying to be practical in the current situation. And there is, in my mind, a lot of empty space and a lot of gaps between the two. And so some of the responses relate to the utopistic bit and some to the practical bit. So let me see if I can just go through them and make a bit more sense and spark some more discussion. Okay, so first thing that's coming up here is the 3D printing. So just a few things on this. In fact, I don't have much understanding of what it would take to produce a 3D printer that prints itself from waste. And obviously thereby can print larger printers and smaller, and kind of an open source project that would allow anyone to start their own creation of stuff, really. But I do have a friend who has won some awards with this, a guy called Sven Maricic. Hi Sven, if you're seeing this. I believe I've told him about this idea about a year ago over a cup of coffee at some point. I didn't quite get him to jump on it immediately, and it does seem like a challenging project with quite a few steps to accomplish. And it also seems like a project that could earn some funding for it, as it probably ticks a lot of the boxes in the domain of acquiring funds. So if anyone is up for sketching this project, let's do it. I'll try to convince Sven to join us. He's a great guy and very motivated, hardworking entrepreneur type. So if there is some movement in this direction, I bet we can at least see how feasible it is and then see where it goes. So Panos mentions the open source ecology project, which seems to be dated by now, but exciting prospects. Okay, so the next thing up is this anti-fragility idea, how it's different from resilience, and how this granular organization would help it all. So in all honesty, it's been a while since I've been through Taleb's book, and I'm not even sure if it's his metaphor or not, but a good metaphor is the rainworm, I think, because if you cut it in half, you get two. So that's the kind of organism that would grow stronger from adverse circumstances. And the idea in terms of community granulation is that we could look at different scales and look at sustainability of communities in relation to the scale, and what are the technologies and the organizational principles that would allow all possible scales to become feasible. So obviously the smallest scale is a single person on an island, Robinson Crusoe. Well, I mean, it highlights thinking about a single person surviving. It highlights typically things like, well, if there is no potable water, then it's doomed. The scenario, it won't happen. So starting from there, and then obviously, I mean, in a way, without multiplication, he won't live forever either. So the idea is to kind of think about orders of magnitude there. So evidently, about 10 people on a farm with potable water are likely to survive. Now, obviously, I'm not calling for you know, turning back the wheel of time dramatically like that. In fact, if I can jump to a utopistic vision, you know, I would join a community where there is a cymbal smith, or a few cymbal smiths, and where people are interested in digital audio signal processing, because that's the kind of thing that I can contribute easily and readily and joyfully. But then, you know, I would sacrifice a lot of other material or otherwise bits that I have that I enjoy currently. So the idea is that a community can be really specialized to do certain things, and well, it's a kind of an open thing. I mean, I think it's potentially useful to start thinking from this disaster scenario, which doesn't seem to be quite the case right now, but it definitely, the current situation allows us to have a better insight in how it could pan out. So a scenario whereby actually people get isolated, a bunch of 20 people. So what do they do? So yeah, there's the idea that, okay, orders of magnitude, one person, okay, what kind of technology would help him survive? 20 people, 200 people, 2,000, 20,000, 200,000. Maybe a multiplier of 10 is a good measure. To go up to 20 billion or more, 200 billion, well, what would it actually, how could it actually work out? Because that would then mean that human society is anti-fragile, because if the circumstances become such that we are left isolated, split up, if the circumstances are such that the population grows immensely, all these scenarios are kind of accounted for. So yeah, it's kind of a wishful thinking really at this stage. It would take probably quite a lot. I mean, one of the things in terms of trying to model this kind of this set of scenarios, I'm actually thinking that it would be good to tap into gamers' time and effort invested into hypothetical situations. I mean, actually, it's probably the last game that I've played myself So in that sense, if we have a game type um, implementation which is actually serving us to model these types of communities, we might get ahead with it. I'm not really sure, but and obviously it's difficult to model really every little bit of human activity and allow for that to flourish or suffer or disappear. And then evidently, how can we predict the new types of activities that people would come up with? But in any case, the whole idea is deeply rooted in the sense that self-organization is more powerful and more intelligent than design. So in this whole approach, it is crucial to find ways to allow the system to grow in multiple ways rather than act clever and design it all. So that's the bit about anti-fragility. Again, I mean, I'm just starting the discussion here. I don't really have a lot of answers. Okay, the word hierarchy comes up here, which is a very interesting bit that I've actually mentioned in the sense that self-organization should be more powerful, although we are currently in a very hierarchical structure. And there is evidence that human neurology craves hierarchies, craves climbing hierarchies and all the rest of it. But I do think that the psychology would adapt quite rapidly to a circumstance. And in fact, the point about envisioning such a system is that it's a paradigm shift, which means that there is no competition with it. There is no need to promote it, so to speak, because if it catches on, it is like the next level. So everything kind of automatically goes there. It's like a new level of a strange attractor. So maybe it's worth getting a bit into the practicalities of stuff. So I mean, evidently the hypothetical, the utopistic view kind of excludes the idea of conquering other people's possessions. So it's largely utopistic at this stage. And in terms of practicalities, how do we even start? I think the crucial term is free. So to actually get together and, for those of us who are privileged enough to have a decent living and free time on top, and who feel motivated to actually invest into development that actually becomes free. And what I've highlighted as the main thing is this digital infrastructure. So the idea that I first of all connect with everyone for any possible reason in terms of exchange freely, and I don't know, it might be the way I kind of romantically see the culture where I came from. Haven't engaged much with it recently, 28 years. But there is a sense in Bosnia, thus, there is a sense that it's more important that the neighbor is happy than that I myself am happy. In a way, kind of investing around into the nearest people, you get a situation, you get an environment which keeps you afloat. So maybe an interesting metaphor is, when you think you're sinking and you try to stay afloat by pedaling and kind of start to panic, then actually the thing to do is to realize that the environment is the thing that keeps you afloat. So just relaxing into it. And that's a kind of a sentiment that I think does catch on in human psychology, the sense of giving being more gratifying than taking and protecting possession. Yeah, and that takes me to the monetary system. I kind of wanted to go through. There's quite a lot of repercussions here that are really interesting. So I'll probably read through some of those, but I'll try to continue the train of thought towards the monetary system and the actual, counting of stuff. By the way, I've just heard interview with one of my childhood heroes, Nela Karajlic, and he was like, "Yeah, all these people, they think it's so they're so rational, making money and self-interest and all the rest, but actually it's totally irrational because it's just being crazy about numbers and how numbers become superior to actual real things." So yeah, let's start from the utopistic monetary systems. Done. There is none. I've mentioned the idea of post hoc monetary system, which would be kind of a transition, a kind of a late stage transition. So the idea that I value someone's contribution, right? So the point is that we might want to stop counting possession and instead start counting contribution, which means that someone's contribution, for example, this monologue, is currently, at the moment of recording it, totally unpredictably valuable. And anyone who finds it valuable can give me a post hoc valuation, can give me, I hate to say money, but a like, right? Likes are the things that we have. And it's actually very similar to that because I don't have a bunch of likes in the bag and then I have to distribute them. But I indeed have I have as many as I would want to. So in a way, valuing something does not decrease the amount of value that I possess. So it's a kind of a growing system. And actually, I was thinking about these things. So it would be good to, I mean, obviously we have to count on some possessive behavior and thinking in the early stages. But the idea is that you might have a system whereby, my mother's like doesn't count, so to speak, because she just thinks everything I do is wonderful. So the kind of the social distance would reduce the value that is assigned. So this kind of post hoc valuation. And then obviously the question is, so, well, if it's so free and there is no limit, what's the point of doing it to start with? Well, it has to do with this trust, which is what money does. So I'll try to there was a bit of a repercussion on this one. So to think about what is money, right? So I kind of offhand quickly said something like, it just gives me trust, because if I have $1 million, then I can hire 100 people and get them to do stuff. So they trust, partly they trust me, but also they trust the monetary system as such that the stuff that they will receive back will benefit them. Um, but actually, if I go back to a kind of more ancient organization principles, then within the tribe there is a person that people trust. In fact, I was considering this for a while. To me, it seems that that's the archetypal priest in the community, not because of inheritance or anything. It is the archetypal role, a person that everyone feels they can trust, or most people feel they can trust, which is a peculiar thing, not necessarily linear or easy to describe. Um, just from personal experience, you show me 10 people that I've never met before, and I can rank them according to whom I trust the most. And I think there's some experiments that prove that my later rationalization of the amount of trust I would lend to any one of those is essentially a justification of my intuition. So there is something, we have people around who we just feel like trusting. So that's the kind of thing we can tap into. And in a way, having a system that would book this trust, well, it's just a practical thing. I mean, it's a bit of an eBay trick, right? So this guy has not been banned yet. In fact, I hardly ever look at the negative and the positives, just because the structure has survived, and supposedly there are protection mechanisms, and there are. But I think we are very ready to start trusting something. I mean, we're actually very ready to take an obvious risk. I think it's a good example, the way that cookies are sold, virtual cookies. Right, so you have to agree. Luckily, some things have boxes that say only necessary cookies. But in all honesty, I haven't read a single license agreement yet. So in that sense, just the inertia, the fact that it seems like it's still happening, and my bank accounts haven't been hacked yet, and all the rest, gives us a little bit of risk feeling, which is something that we latch on to. I mean, gambling is obviously a catchy thing for a human psyche. So I think that this is essentially just a kind of a wrapping around the fact that we are inclined to trust everyone and willing to take the risk with our trust as well. So yes, the question is, do we actually need this stepping stone? And then the first stepping stone from the current situation was to allow for free things. In fact, I've had, in terms of moving from the current situation, I was thinking about a currency which buys only necessities, a kind of a food currency, if you will, and water, obviously, and shelter related things, kind of the stuff that is necessary for us to survive, and separate that currency from the current one and call the current one something like luxury currency. I don't think we can overthrow the rich people easily. I don't think it's worth trying either. What's worth trying is to create a parallel structure. In fact, let me not go there yet, but just to finish this one off, so with this food currency, what we could have is actually, a monthly minimum income thingy fairly easily. And then if the situation is that this currency cannot buy unnecessary things, and we could consider beer unnecessary and many other things unnecessary, which we're kind of used to. And it could help us lift the people from the suffering they're in terms of not being able to have the basic necessities available. And evidently all the rich people wouldn't be very interested in the food currency. And then the exchange rate between the two currencies would be an exciting thing to follow, because it would hopefully allow the luxury currency to diminish in value. In fact, if there is a political power to do so, it's evidently, how should I put it? It's not necessary, but it would be very needed to limit the amount of luxury money that you can have. I mean, in fact, that is already limited, because no one can spend endless amount of money on luxury. It's only so much. I don't know who this was, but someone was talking about how much beefsteak you can eat. It's just there is a natural limit to that. Because in a sense, obviously, if you provide and produce the basic necessities, that's the currency you're receiving. And if you provide luxury, that's the currency you're receiving. And then the exchange rate could somehow be dynamic. But I think in all honesty, I think there's a lot of friction with the idea for most thinkers, progressive thinkers, with the idea of producing or chipping in with the production of the basic necessities. I think it's a cultural thing, the sense of my understanding of digital audio processing is thus far superior to people who can only make food from soil, and I don't subscribe to this. I hope this came through as ironically as I meant it to. Because this whole idea of having different size, different orders of magnitude communities survive necessitates everyone to be able to produce the basic needs. In fact, I was thinking, I have a good friend who's kind of started his own alternative schooling system, András Halmos. Sorry, Adam Halmos. He will forgive me. Both of them. I've actually had the idea, because I'm in education, been there for a while, and my radical idea is to stop, halt, erase all the subject matters from schools and have only two. One is shelter and the other one is food. And from that, develop everything that is technical develops from the shelter subject, and everything that is biological, social, develops from the food. And the main reason I've been caressing this idea is to maintain, to preserve the motivation. I kind of remember one of the earliest memories is, just putting something in a corner and call it my little shelter. And obviously I'm technically inspired, and if someone would have taken that through that very deep motivation for shelter, and then start to teach me about bearing load to start with, all the rest, starting to calculate things, geometry, how long, all the technical stuff from there, I think that would have been a laugh. I mean, in my education, I had a horrible dip with some really annoying maths teachers. Luckily, it all came back. And then on the other hand, the food, which is again something that directly affects us, the taste, and because this utopistic vision that I have actually involves everyone having their own totally self-built, self-designed, sustainable, futuristic shelter that they spend life developing and building, and having all their foods also very much part of their daily activity, the production of these things. Evidently, I mean, in a way, this currency division also has something to do with the idea. In fact, at some point, I was thinking of a third currency as well, because we should have an increasing gap between stuff that people never even touch, right? It's fully produced by machines, and stuff that we actually make. So I was entertaining this idea about, having a free fork at any point in time, because, just a sheet of metal cut to this particular shape and bent, and we can produce an infinite amount of forks for hardly any cost. And therefore a free fork, but I would also have a neighbor, potentially, who is, hand making forks and spends a substantial amount of hours with all the details and everything. And those type of goods actually become monetarily divided from the industrial goods. I mean, obviously maintenance of the factories and industrial production is something that probably humans need to do. But yeah, I mean, the whole idea is that slowly, as the generations die out and are born, slowly to actually move away from possession into contribution, and actually teach children that, and evidently that's why these kind of post hoc monies, cash, likes, whatever they are useful, because we do crave these feedback mechanisms, these bits of connection, really. Okay, so I've touched on this, and then how does this monetary system relate to this network of profiles? And as I kind of had a sense that this would trigger the kind of the totalitarian side of the coin, in terms of everyone being tracked and having a verified profile which maintains the whole history of a person. And there are some, thanks for this, guys. There's some really cool links in the responses in terms of solving this with a decent blockchain. I mean, to me, it seems I'm not a cryptographer at all. I kind of read into these bits at some point, and the thing that I have to assume and cannot verify because of lack of understanding is that the entropy of the blockchain is such that I can have a unique ID without checking all the rest, right? So that seems to be this point where my finite signal processing brain just cracks and goes like, okay, sure. I can imagine it, but I cannot verify it myself personally. But it does seem like the great brains behind the blockchains have figured it out, and it is indeed safe like that. In fact, if I'm right, I at some point I think it was a 12-word poem that I needed to cover the amount of characters for my unique ID, which means that if I remember that forever, then I'm kind of safe. Obviously, I love defectology. Gazzaniga is the king of defectology. Read his books. Very informative. So obviously things can go wrong and I can totally forget it. So in terms of solving this, which way to push forward, it's really tough. I think in the end, the more security we try to build, the more gaps there are. This is a kind of an unverified, intuitive approach to law and kind of trying to secure stuff. But in the end, it's supposed to be unnecessary. It's supposed to become unnecessary anyway. The security, it has to be safe. I mean, we are lending trust and we are taking risk, whole lot of it anyway already. And in fact, we are trusting the system that seems to have been built for the cream to be easily extracted. So I don't think it can go much worse from here. So it really is about the trust, and I think a network of profiles. We have one here at the DM. Maybe that's sufficient software to start from to build a larger one where people can use it without having to feel part of a political stream or anything. And that's where the keyword free is quite crucial, because if creating a profile, and I would probably even suggest not to even call it anything like the party that we have here. I was thinking of names like Freebay and Freebie and B and Free Blah or whatever. So just to create a system that will allow all these digital connections to be made, that would allow to the trust rating to build up, so people do this. And in fact, if there is a need, and I would suggest there is a need to actually verify every member, then these risks are even lower in terms of someone trying to hack the system. So yeah, I think I've have received some links and keywords here to look into these profile systems. Now there is this comment about Chinese citizen scoring point system. which is a kind of a scary thing in relation to the post hoc currency and the trust. But I think the crucial thing here is that the scoring is produced by by people, and most of all by people whom we are not acquainted with. So these type of interactions. But I think again I have to stress that trying to patch up all the holes, I don't think it's very productive. The more productive thing is to make sure that the motivation is right, and and potentially that the amount of extracted cream cannot happen on an industrial scale, right? So I think actually as a society we've always had these systems that allow the few to live off the labor of the many, but it hasn't become really bad before it became industrial making of money, which is just obsession. It's a really funny thing if you take the perspective on it. So yeah, how do we get there? Well, yeah, I think again the free is the key word. So to the extent that we can as volunteers kind of invest into making stuff free for everyone, to that extent we can loosen this burden of cash. And in fact, I think the only way to go forward is stop spending the cash that is currently available and that is being accumulated disproportionately. Because obviously in the current situation, this cash can pay for protecting itself, but it cannot pay for someone, to have to use it if they can go a long way without using it. And in fact, I think I've heard, I think it was actually James Corbyn with Varoufakis. Did I say James? It is late at night, I'm sorry. I was meant to say Jeremy Corbyn. With Varoufakis, and he mentioned that we have an acre of food that was about 2 years ago already, that was fully maintained by the drones. And in fact, solar drones, I don't think they're too far away at this stage. So the ability to actually produce food, and then all the rooftops. I think there should be food growing on those as well. Okay, so we have agreement with first mover advantage in bitcoins and blockchain based things. That's great to read. Cool. So yeah, thanks, Panos. A lot of interesting additions there. Jameson had some interesting bits to add as well. Let me just read through it. Yeah, well, Jameson's comment is really motivating in terms of highlighting all the agreements and all the different directions that are overlapping these ideas. So yeah, I'm really happy to join the DSC as well. So from Pierre, hello. Really glad to have further audio heads around. I look forward to some chatting. In fact, I'm also in Spain right now, a bit more south, geographically in Africa, but my Spanish is improving. I've escaped here to enjoy the weather. As all the work I perform is online now. So yeah, Pierre or Pedro, I'm not sure, highlights the decentralized identifiers, W3 consortium, solid projects. A lot of interesting links here. So these things have been going on. I knew that these aren't my ideas. These things kind of happen of their own. In fact, I'm quite convinced that that intelligence is not something that is subjective. There seems to be evidence that social animals did clever things as a group first before a single subject realized the complexity of what they've just performed. And that does make sense in a way in how this adaptability intelligence type thing grows from complexity, and inevitably a multitude of subjects is a more complex system than the brains of a single subject. So in that sense, I think that individual contribution is replaceable, to say the least. So any of the historical people, all their achievements would have been made without them, maybe a bit later. But the way that the society develops, again, is a self-organizing system, it seems, which supersedes the kind of intelligence a single subject bears. Nevertheless, it's very exciting to play with these things, obviously. So yeah, I'm not sure if I've added a horrible amount of stuff here. I kind of repeated a few things, so I'll probably try again to get to sleep. And hello to everyone. I'm really glad to get involved, and to all the other people who aren't yet involved, and you want to see things happen at the forefront of social organization. Be welcome, and take good care.